Hey, what's up? It's Bond, and today I want to talk about Archetype Entertainment's Exodus, the upcoming game that has caught the attention of a lot of space sci-fi gamers. I know for myself, the Mass Effect community, and many of the people who have just been dying for another game like that have really caught on to Exodus and have lots of questions and excitement about it. So today I want to do a little speculation about how soon or how far away the game could be based on the little we know, and really more so talk about how soon we may get some concrete information. So just to kick it off, I I think Exodus is a funny game because you can look at it as a game that maybe it's coming out this year, maybe it comes out in 2024, and that would be interesting. Or maybe it's not coming out for 4 more years. Maybe it comes out after the next Mass Effect. I think that's unlikely. I think both of those are actually fairly unlikely. If I had to just throw out a gut guess, my guess is that Exodus comes out in 2025. But there's a few bits and pieces we can speak about fairly quickly here, to kind of educate our speculation here. So the first one being that this is a new studio and this is their first game. If you look at like the studio that made the Callisto Protocol, they spun up from nothing. They made a game in, I believe, roughly about 4 years. How that game was received or how good it was is kind of not really the point of this example, but it seems realistic that knowing that Archetype started a few years ago, that if they've really been efficient, and if the scope of this game isn't insane, that they could spin up a game that could be out later this year or next year, and that be fairly realistic. One thing I think that people need to get away from is that there is a stark possibility for their first go at this game and potentially the start of a franchise. Maybe they may not be going for a 200-hour epic, right? So if you've watched all their little videos and checked out all their lore and all of that, they've even talked about it in their little Q&A dev vids that they've been posting on Twitter and other social media. They've really been focusing on the time dilation as like their hook, right? They haven't tried to make it seem like, they haven't done the Starfield thing and said, we have 1,500 planets that you can explore. Because that's probably not where the replayability and the longevity and the interest in this game takes place. They've been very talkative about how the choices you make could affect what happens months, years, decades, or I believe they've even referenced centuries later. So something to consider is that we may play a game that takes place in a relatively, seemingly small gameplay space, but uses the hook of the time dilation and the way that your choices affect what happens in the game as what gives the game depth and gives it length. So if that's true, I think it would be reasonable to say that maybe this game is a smaller scaled or smaller scoped game that could come out reasonably quickly. And I think that's a supportive of potentially it coming out this year or next year. Or maybe not. Maybe it's got a gigantic grand scale, and this truly is going to be, Drew Karpyshyn's new space epic, space opera, and it's going to take 3 or 4 more years to come out because they're making this giant universe that will also have the impact of time dilation. I don't know. I think the other big factor is to consider who's making this. So this is a studio full of industry veterans, and I'm sure they have some new folks as well. But if you look at photos they've taken of their dev team and stuff, or at least what it was at one point fairly recently, looks like it's a pretty small studio, maybe 50 people. And there's a good chance they've grown since then, especially since the reveal of the game. What people don't realize is for every time you complain about like, oh, why'd they announce that game so early? they probably announced it early so they could hire people for it. The marketing goes towards people and developers as well. They need employees to make these games, especially if this is a new studio. It's kind of a fledgling group, and it's not at all uncommon. In fact, it's industry practice to use hype trailers and stuff like that to get people interested in coming to make your game. And so I think that the small-ish team, again, going back to that scope and scale factor, may mean that if it is this big scope and scaled game, maybe years away while they're literally still building their team. I do know they have multiple listings on their website for various positions that they're hiring for. Or again, if it goes back to a smaller scope and scale game, then maybe they have as big a team as they need, and they can do exactly what they want to do. And again, if their longevity and stuff comes with the hook of the time dilation, then maybe they don't need 300 devs to make this game in a relatively quick manner. We'll have to wait and see. There is a little concern, at least from my side. I've talked about it before. So their Archetype Entertainment's parent companies are Wizards of the Coast, pretty famous for their ownership of the Dungeons and Dragons IP and their recent collaboration with Larian to make Baldur's Gate 3, as well as Wizard of the Coast owner is Hasbro. If you were a child at some point, you will probably know Hasbro as a toy company who has their hooks in game dev in a distant way. Well, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast just recently laid off over 1,000 people. As far as we know, there was no indication that Archetype Entertainment was affected by those layoffs, which is awesome. But it still gives some pause, I think, about what's going on with that company. On the other hand, if you want a more optimistic outlook on it, which I tend to focus on, you're talking about two pretty beefy companies that are above Archetype Entertainment, and it likely means that they hopefully are not going to have any issues with funding, at least to what's reasonable to a first project with a new dev team, and what it seems like is going to be a unique concept with the focus on time dilation in a genre that we're a little more familiar with, what seems to be a realistic aesthetic space sci-fi game that is going to be really focused on narrative, and that's really cool. So if I had to give my honest guess, I would put most of my money on Exodus coming out in 2025. The one thing that's really been fooling me is that they have all this pre-order founder stuff where, if you become a founder, where it's just basically sign up for their newsletter, you get this cool cape and these cosmetics in the game. Well, on one hand, I would say if they're already thinking about that stuff, they must be pretty far along if they're already willing to promise specific items in the game. But then at the same time, that's marketing, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing at all. But starting new IPs is really hard. It's even really hard for established, long-term, well-respected studios. It's hard to do new IP. That's the reason you see so many games are reboots and sequels. Same with movies and other media as well. So they may be thinking ahead when it comes to these cosmetics and these rewards for becoming a founder or pre-ordering or whatever, simply for marketing purposes. And maybe the game is 4 years away. I still, like I said before, lean towards the game probably coming out within the next 2 years. I would say, late 2025 at the latest. But this is marginally informed, potentially educated speculation. We do know that here in January and in the coming months, they're supposed to reveal more information about various companions that you can have in the game. And I would be willing to bet that will culminate in June, around the Summer Game Fest time, or the E3 Rest in Peace time. Is potentially they'll give us a big announcement of when this game is actually coming out, whether it's later this year, next year, or in the coming years. So that's what I think. Down in the comments, let me know when you think Exodus may be coming out. Do you think it's going to be even maybe a next-gen game? Is it going to come out before or after the next Mass Effect? Give me your thoughts on that. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. I do cover all things Mass Effect and The Division and potentially Exodus, as well as any other games that catch my eye or that you all tell me about and I want to chat about. You can catch me all over the internet as Bond Diesel, including over on Twitch, where I do stream a little bit. You can also catch my 2 gaming podcasts, the Bonfire Podcast and the Mass Effect Hypecast, right here on this YouTube channel or on any podcast app or network. That's all I have for this one, so until next time.